Welcome back. Now let's get the show on the road. Yesterday marked what used to be called Democracy Day because it marked the end of, well, the beginning of democracy in Nigeria after many years of military intervention. Even though May 29th is no longer called Democracy Day, it is now called Inauguration Day. So we've had unbroken democracy for 21 years. It's quite apt for us to look at how we have fared in this democracy in the last 21 years. That is since 1999, when the military handed over to a civilian government headed by former General Olusegun Obasanjo. To help us look at this, it's my pleasure to welcome a legal practitioner, Anthony Ebe. Good morning.
Thank you so much, Anthony.
And joining us from Abuja will be Obinaya Uruakpa, a public and international affairs analyst. Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, you look happy enough. Are you happy because it is the day after Inauguration Day?
Yes, I am happy. I always look on the brighter side of life.
Good for you. Well, since I'm with you, let me start with you then. So 21 years unbroken of democracy. I mean, in your mind, how have we fared in 21 years? Government of the people, for the people, by the people. Do you think this kind of governance, way of governing, is apt for our country, for our circumstance?
Thank you very much, Alera. It's open to debate, and I like the fact that you quoted Abraham Lincoln, governments of the people, for the people, and by the people. Usually what lawyers do, I'm happy you have a legal practitioner in the house, is to query every situation. So we want to query government of the people. Has the government been of the people, really? For the people, the governments we've had over the years, have they been for the people? By the people? Have the people's votes counted? Have the people been included? Has there been widespread inclusiveness? Those are issues we may need to trash in the course of this discourse. But I'll tell you that, thank God, we are alive. That's even the beginning. We are still one nation. There are a few nations who have had issues in the past 21 years. Now, I think it was MKO Abiola that said, if you spend 20 years learning how to be mad, how many years will you use to practice it? Now, we're on the eve of our 60th birthday. We've been on this journey since 1960, when the Union Jack was lowered. At the time the colonial masters handed over the reins of power to us, we began to see some patterns. Now, we said we wanted to get the colonial masters out, but as a student of literature and international politics, I'll be quick to submit to you that we ended up having what I call neo-colonialists taking over the reins of power. So we moved from frying pan to fire. And I will also submit that it's not just about those who have held positional leadership. Even those of us who have been followers have been part of this challenge. If people get the leadership they deserve, we also have played certain roles in the way we have elected people. Yes, you can say that there is issue of political education and awareness, how much our people are actually aware about what politics is, about what democracy is. That having been said, the fact remains that those who have had the responsibility of holding the knife and the yam and dispensing the dividends of democracy have questions to answer.
Okay, Obinaya, questions to answer. Anthony, you were nodding your head when Obinaya was talking about the processes so far.
Yes. And I think I like that tripartite definition of democracy. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But I think the fulcrum around which everything revolves in democracy is that by the people. Has the government in Nigeria for the past 21 years been determined by the people? And that calls to question our electoral process.
Are you going to answer that question?
I will.
Okay.
I will attempt to answer it. that calls to question the electoral process. And it is, to my mind, the center of all of democracy, everywhere, and particularly in Nigeria. If the electoral process can become credible, everything we talk about concerning the gains of democracy will begin to fall into place. And until that happens, we will just be on a merry-go-round.
Are you implying that there have not been any gains?
There have been gains, but we could have made much more reasonable progress.
Okay, let's enumerate some of those gains that you say there are.
Well, one of the gains, if you ask me, is that for whatever reason that we can marshal here, we are beginning to feel that somehow the ordinary Nigerian can become something in government. Unlike during the military era when you had to be in uniform to be anything. So to that extent, we have been able to make some progress. But take that out of the equation and I am lost for what else to see us again in the past 21 years.
Yeah, but
and the reason is still the electoral process.
Yeah, but even in becoming someone, as you put it,
Yes.
There's plenty of, I can't even find the word. The process, as you say, makes it a very rigorous exercise.
Yes.
For
Tedious.
even that nobody
Yes.
to become somebody.
Yes.
The things he has to do, the things he has to go through
Yes.
to become that somebody
Yes.
because he wants to go into politics
Yes.
is the very reason that puts many good people out of that ring.
Yes, and that's exactly why I'm talking about the political process, the electoral process particularly. You want to interrogate the question, why should I feel obligated to obey anybody when I think that that fellow stole my mandate? And that is one area where the politicians are missing the point terribly. Now, it's simple. I am supposed to determine who rules me. You sit in your closet one way or another and steal that mandate. And you turn around and want me to call you Honorable, Excellency, whatever other superlatives you want to add to your name. And you expect me to obey. And let me tell you how terribly this is impacting on the Nigerian generally. Because the electoral process is not credible, the leaders are not seen, or the rulers, I always prefer to call them rulers because that's who they really are not seen as leaders. And you don't want to follow the one you don't think ought to be leading you anyway. And each time there is an election cycle, everything about our national life is paused. Particularly, I'll talk about my own little jurisdiction, which is the judiciary. As soon as an electoral cycle is ended, nearly 50 or 60% of the judges across the courts in Nigeria, courts of record, are drawn and made members, chairmen, and whatever other titles you want to give them of election petition panels. And that puts paid to all matters pending before those courts. And that means our business life grinds to a halt because you can't ventilate any grievance in court. The judge is not sitting, the court is not sitting. There's no alternative to it. Now, what happened this last electoral cycle was particularly pathetic. Just when the courts were beginning, the judges were beginning to return to their courts, the COVID-19 lockdown started. So for nearly 1 year, nothing commercial has happened in our courtrooms. Very sad for our economy. It impacts, look at what is happening to the Naira. You can also trace it to that root. Look at what is happening. Look at the institutions. They are all suffering because of this, our electoral process.
Let me take it back to Obinna. Obinna, he spoke earlier about having to respect someone who you know didn't get there by correct in quotes, means, and how you should obey him and respect him when you know exactly how he got there. How can we ensure that it is those who are going to do right by us, the people, who actually get these positions so that we can respect them? And a lot of Nigerians do not obey the law because they think whoever has made the law or whoever is at the helm of affairs does not deserve their respect enough for them to do as he says. So if we get the right people up there, obviously we're building a better society because we will then respect that person and obey what he says.
Thank you, Alero. John Maxwell once said that leadership is influence. My people will tell you that the reason a dog follows a man with a big tummy is if he doesn't do one, he will do the other. So let's bring it closer home to where everybody will understand this. Let's call a spade a spade. People are no fools. We've been here for 60 years. I'll give you an example. My father was a lecturer, God rest his soul. In 1993, all the lecturers in Alvanico College of Education, let's say almost all, picked up their voter's card and queued up. You know what it takes to get lecturers to go out, leave the academic work, and go out to queue up with all the hustle and bustle, and voted. We were tracking the results on a screen. That was Humphrey Moses' time, only to end up with an annulment. I don't know if my dad voted again.
Obina, if you don't mind, we'll just have to interrupt you here, but we'll come back to pick it up from that point where the lecturers came out to vote. Are they still voting? Will they come out to vote? Or are they even educating others about the voting process in Nigeria? But we'll look at that in a moment. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us and welcome back. We've been joined by Mr. Dakwa Akinyosun, a legal practitioner. Thank you for joining us.
Morning.
But before we come to you, Obinna was talking about what his father and his colleagues had to go through in elections that led to an annulment. That was in 1993, the June 12th. I was going to say 2012. I'm sorry. So, Obinna, you were talking about what your father and his colleagues went through that in that election that went on to an annulment, and after that, you're not sure whether they voted again. Why do you think they've not voted after that?
Now, I like the fact that you picked it up from there. It's about trust. There's a trust deficit in the system. The people have been told several things, and they've seen other things happen. We've had situations where campaigners have come to campaign and say, well, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do that. They disappear after the elections and return 4 years after to tell us another story. Yes, there are bright spots in the firmament. We've seen a few persons do great work, try their best, efforts have been seen. We've seen it since 1999. We've seen the Obasanjo administration, the Yar'Adua administration, the Jonathan administration. We've seen citizen participation. We've also seen the present administration. We've seen infrastructure at certain levels. But like my brother that was said, to whom much is given, much is expected. For a nation that has generated so much inflow from the monocultural products we've been running, which is oil, even with the pandemic, are we going to use the pandemic as an excuse? What happened to savings over the years? And I do not cast aspersions at the present government. What did we do? Between 1999 and 2015, we had spent over $10 billion on independent power projects. Did we hit the mark? South Africa, with a population of not more than 55 million, has over 45,000 megawatts. We're still grappling between 3,000 and 7,000. What has happened to the power sector? So how do you want us to trust? I'm an MSME. I'm a student of politics. I run my own business. We pay taxes. The question is, when we pay taxes, the average person wants to believe that the taxes have actually worked for him. So even when we give out the indices and the figures that we have achieved so much, The average person on the streets wants to see that impact his pocket, impact his welfare. He wants to go to hospital and be able to get health care. But where are we today? That having been said, the fact remains that, like the Chinese will say, the best time to plant a tree, like I will always say, was 20 years ago. The next best time to plant it is now. Despite what happened to my father, I am still a participant in politics, but I have even been a victim. You go contest an election, and they tell you the result 7 a.m. when the election is supposed to start at 1 p.m., and they tell you the result was written last night. And this was written by a certain cabal. And I've seen it happen from 2006, and I still see a repeat of it. You still see a situation where even on your channel's report last night in the news, a woman bought a form for her, contributed $7 million for her husband to buy a form for governorship in Edo State for $21 million. Where does that happen? So when you take $21 million for governorship election, where do you want us to get the money from? Then you're encouraging us to go and steal. So even as we fight anti-corruption, we need to also engage the political parties to help the anti-corruption mantra of this government to work. And then the government needs to also face the people, because it's about participation, about the political association, recruitment, and so on. When you allow a political party, and I believe even the president himself queried the last time they asked him to pay so much to pick up a form. What you have just done is you have excluded the people who would have done so much work, which was what Alero was addressing. How do you want a lecturer to buy a form for 21 million? Or you've not heard that Sam Egu was once a lecturer. You've not heard a few other people were once lecturers or were teachers. Shagari was a grade 2 or grade 3 teacher. He became a president. How would Shagari have become a president? So what would happen is that Shagari would have opened himself up, and then the wrong kinds of people would give him the money to buy the form. Then how do you fight corruption when those people begin to demand a return on investment? I believe that the issue of corruption in Nigeria is even systemic. So you have the not too young to run bill that was passed because a few young people came together and fought, which is also why we, the citizens, must keep our eyes open. The price wise men pay for not being vigilant is to be ruled by fools. A philosopher once said. And my people will tell you, if you're not close to the fire, your yam will never rose quickly.
Obinna, we do hear you, but let's get back here and get Dapo to weigh in on all that you've put out there. Dapo, Obinna is very passionate about what he's talking about. And all in all, he's pointed to one thing, the leadership selection process, the electoral process, trust deficit. And yes, there's light at the end of the tunnel, but the process of getting to the end of the tunnel doesn't look too good. And I saw you were really writing.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's made some very interesting points. And some of it I can see he's passionate and maybe somewhat angry about the way the nation is going. And I share his passion and his anger on many of the points. However, we also need to closely examine and ask ourselves, what is the younger generation doing? He mentioned the cost of buying election forms. How much was the form when Shagari bought the form? I don't know. But was it cheaper at that time than it is today, comparatively? It's a difficult analysis. But one thing is certain, campaigning for any election is expensive. If you don't have funds, you will not be able to campaign. That is just simply the logistics of going all over.
Do we have to make it so expensive that many good people cannot join the fray?
No, I'm talking about
out of reach of the.
I'm talking about the realistic expenses of running a campaign. You have to do a television advert, for instance, coming on channels will cost me money. If people do not hear what I want to do, I will not get that opportunity. Putting up a paid advert in a newspaper is expensive. Going from town to town, city to city, visiting people, being known is an expensive process.
Posters.
So you cannot run away from the fact that it is an expensive process anywhere in the world. Now, what is the place of technology that is evolving? But as it was constituted, it definitely cannot be run by the poor. But what can the poor do to make themselves heard is the situation. I have been around the campaign trail before, and you find that the way we campaign, even in the southern part of the country, differs slightly from what you find in the north. on the South, particularly the Southwest, you'll find a lot of people demanding from you, give us our money. Give us money before we vote for you, because they now see it as a right. On the other hand, in other parts of the country, in the North, they will give you their own money to say, we believe in you. So right from the get-go, we sometimes, by our orientation today, have already shortchanged ourselves. And we need to begin to reorient ourselves. Trust deficit. Of course, many politicians come up today without even a plan. They just come up with beautiful photographs and say, vote for me. Nobody, I mean, I remember in the elections he mentioned, when it was UPN and SDP, UPN, I mean, Awolowo and Shagari, yes. They had a manifesto. I remember that Awolowo, when he came out, there was a song he sang, they had a plan of what they will do when they get to office. Today, they don't tell you what they want to do. Until the APC was formed again and they came up with some things that they say, we will do when we get into office. Nobody was talking about what you want to do in office again. It was just a simple matter of that, I have the best posters, vote me. And until we begin to ask people, what do you want to go and do when you go into office? What is the party manifesto? What is this party stand? What is the ideology of this party? Are you socialist? Are you Republican? What are you going to do? But we have to ask those questions ourselves today and begin to fight more. He spoke about national savings. National savings has been, I mean, there's been no savings. That has been clear. That is clear. So whatever is being done now has to be built. And I like the way he put it that well. From the best time to start it is now. To all intents and purposes, this government has done very well in some things. They have not done up to expectation in some things. And we just have to give it to where it is. There are many areas where things are changing every day. It's a rapidly moving ball, but we have to keep our eyes on the ball. But generally speaking, on the average, I think 21 years of democracy is an improvement. At least we've seen party change in election now. A ruling party, a party in the majority, lost an election. That is a major thing anywhere in the world. And no matter the rough edges, no matter the roughening of the edges, we, the common people, have to stand firm and begin to ask questions and say, we will not do it this way again. But until the mass of people start asking questions and rejecting the money theology, money philosophy, that if you give me money, I will vote for you, we're going to be going around in circles.
Okay. Tony.
Yes.
In all of this, the people
yes.
seems to be the most important person.
Yes.
Let's say the persons. Are the people involved like they should be? Government of the people?
By the people.
Is it of the people in Nigeria? Is it by the people in Nigeria? Are the people,
Is it for the people?
Are we involved like we should be? Do we understand what the issues are? Because I think if we did, we wouldn't be asking for money.
Yes.
But then that arises from the trust issue, which is
The
underlying,
trust deficit
which is underlying all of this, because
yes.
the people see all of them as thieves. They've stolen our money anyway, yes. So let's get our own share of the money. Yes. It's our money. So all of this is going on. How do we get the people to understand what this is all about? I mean, fully understand, to be able to partake like they should.
You see, the situation appears to be very murky. Now, the people who are supposed to be, by every standard of measure, the center of democracy, have been sidelined completely. And until the electoral process returns that power to the people, we will just be on a merry-go-round. That's the simple truth. Now, I want to make it very clear. I am completely a Nigerian. I don't belong to any political party. Some people will say I'm not a card-carrying member, but that in Nigeria means a completely different thing. You can be a member but not carrying a card. For me, I'm neither a member nor a card-carrying member. So when I speak as a concerned Nigerian. Now, everything about Nigeria touches on that government by the people. The institutions are comatose. Why? Because when a few persons sit down in their closets and determine who becomes what, when it is time to share the spoils of war, it is also those few who will get it. And that's why you keep talking about recycling. And let me be clear on this. Politicians in Nigeria don't know that Nigerians are not quite as stupid as they think. Nigerians may not be as wise as the politicians, but they are not quite as stupid as the politicians think. And that is one area where, until we address, we will not be able to flow together. Now, the lesson from what that was submitted on a short while ago is that one party seems to be saying to itself, the other party made a mistake in letting us win an election when they were in office. We will never let that happen. And that is what is killing the electoral process. We can't venture into this fray by letting the contestants determine the outcome of the battle. We will determine it before they go into the fray. Because we don't want to take any chances like the other people did. And that is wrong.
Well, we did determine in the last elections. Because
we did not.
They were taken aback when they lost. They didn't believe that they could lose.
We didn't learn anything, and we didn't determine anything.
Didn't we?
We didn't.
We did not vote for this party that is ruling now?
No.
Oh.
No.
Okay.
And that is being very frank. Now, the question you'll ask yourself is, come back to even what you saw on television alone. Because I know that the coverage was quite extensive the last time. If you were sitting in the comfort of your living room and you had to determine the result of the elections just based on what you saw even on television alone, would you not have annulled that election? Would you not have ordered the parties to go back to the starting block and take that race all over again? And it comes back to what I talked about, the electoral process, the judicial process, our economic life, the institutions, and our general life as Nigerian. All these things go back to the same root. Until the electoral process is credible, we cannot get everybody who can contribute intellectually to come on board to deal with the institutions. Okay. And as long as the institutions don't take root and begin to grow, we will just be on this merry-go-round of whoever is there determines who gets what and how much of what.
Doc, that thing of blaming the politicians, blaming the leadership, those who have gotten into office, seem to be like a recurring decimal, as they say. Case in point, I always tell this story anytime we're talking this democracy and politics. A young man, he was in the studio here, young lawyer, said he used to play football with his colleagues, and they were like, you should go for this office, you should go for this office. In the next election, you should go, we'll be behind you. So he went and did campaign and everything. When he came to his own to say, okay, I have gone, I've got the nomination, I've got the ticket, so you guys, so it's almost here, so you're going to vote. You know what they told him? Bros. Alpha. You know that thing? That man that you want to contest came and so you have to. So at the end of the day, the people here still bear the blame. Tony talked about, Tony said the people have not learnt a lesson. How do we get by getting the people to weigh into this democratic process? Instead of sitting back to cast blame, own the process, indeed. How do we do that?
The first thing we need to do is get involved. You see, before now, I, like many other Nigerians, was an armchair critic. I would just look and complain and grumble and say, oh, this thing is not working, these leaders are corrupt, but we never really got involved in it. Until you begin, I think there's a passage that says, unless you leave the boat, you cannot walk on water. Until you take a step into the waters, you really cannot change the process. How many of us on election day actually go out to vote? We complain that the voting centers are too far from my house. There's too much difficulty in getting there. And that simple process of even going out to vote, we miss the opportunity, and then we come back again and grumble 3 years later, they haven't done anything. But until we begin to actually get involved, first of all, in voting, then backtrack.
Even if the votes don't count.
You see, it is more difficult to manipulate the process if people have actually come out to vote. It is when there are a lot of unused voters' cards and thumbprint reader, things that should have been used up by you that are not used, are the things that make it easier to manipulate. But if I've used it, they can't change my fingerprint. But if the papers are there blank, then somebody else can thumbprint on it. So that makes, our not being involved is the first problem. Secondly, in the campaigns, we don't go out to ask questions. We just see the convoys driving by, the carnivals, they wave at us. But
they don't give us the opportunity to ask questions.
No, but you see, election campaigns are now moving to a situation where you're getting town hall meetings. We're getting more television interviews. Do we get involved in even phoning and actually ask questions? Do we mobilize our own people around us and say, hey guys, like you just said, your friend comes to you and all he's asking you for is, what do I get when you get into office?
Okay, just hold your thoughts there. We'll need to go on a quick break. We'll come back. We'll pick it up from that point. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. We're still looking at the gains of democracy. And at this point, we're talking about the people. You were talking about the owning the process, being a part of it. Emmanuel Ayewa says the electoral process has not evolved enough. Less than 40% of registered voters actually vote. Less than 15% of citizens select their leaders. Votes don't count anyway. Too many technicalities, excessive election tribunal efforts, too expensive, blatant rigging. Does that summarize everything you were?
Well, it kind of agrees with what I said earlier, that if we do not go out and vote, you're also lending your hand to rigging of elections. So until we also start taking the blame of not getting involved in it, then we will not move forward. Secondly, as was said earlier, there's also no consequence for bad behavior until we start sending people to prison for sitting in an office that he should not have been. Because what just happens is that the judgment is given, the man gets removed from office, but all the actions he has taken while illegally or wrongfully occupying that office
still stand.
Is allowed to stand. But there should be some sort of reversal. There should be some kind of penalizing the fact that you got into that place wrongly at all, so that people will not be so desperate to get into that office. We can begin to see a bit of it taking off now, in that EFCC is calling people to account for deeds they did 15, 20 years ago. That means that those of you who are there today know that eventually, someday, somehow, sometime, you will be called, you may be called to account.
Yes.
But unless that is sustained, if it dies after this administration again, then all the gains we have gotten will also be lost.
Okay.
Because every time there's always someone who wants to make money.
Okay. Obinna, let's look at the issue of electoral malpractices. Even with the various amendments to the electoral law, we still saw a number of misdeeds during the last elections. We saw people carting away ballot boxes and all that, and nothing happened. If we did something about malpractice, which seems to be quite rampant, would we not have a cleaner and more credible system?
You're right, Alero. And I'm a parent. I have 2 children, Olako and Eina. You don't let Olako, my daughter, do something. She's older, she's about 10. The brother is about 8. If Eina, my son, watches to see what Olako does, and she does something wrong, and you, the parent, do nothing, next time Eina will do ×2 what Olako has done. It's simple. That was just addressed it. And I like the fact that Anthony is angrier than myself. In fact, he's so angry that he does not believe election held. Having been a victim of election malpractice myself, you don't want to be in my position. I've been a victim. My role model, Sam Adeyemi, came out one day and said, guys, we cannot afford to stay away and not get involved. So we got involved, 2006, did all the campaigns. On the eve of the election, or in fact, on the morning of the election, I got a phone call. Bros, I think they wrote the result last night. I'm still investigating that matter several years after. Have I given up? No, I haven't. I'm still involved because someone wrote a book and said, because I'm involved. Now, reason being that I understand history. My dad was a history lecturer, so I understand the evolutionary process of history. We are a developing nation. We are about to clock 60. America is over several years, and you know, so we have taken democracy, which dates back to the Athenians, to the Greeks, and so on. So we need to understand that we will evolve. It's not a microwave thing. Now, that having been said, the citizens need to participate. I also was asked to bring money to ensure that the delegates were well taken care of. And I was just working and taking salary from an organization where I resigned to come contest. So we need to galvanize mobilization of the people. We need to galvanize political education and awareness. Now, National Orientation Agency and all of the agencies need to get involved. The civil society organizations need to participate. The traditional rulers, the subnationals need to participate. We cannot leave this in for government. Now that all the single product we have allowed ourselves to focus on, when we used to be number one in cocoa, number one in yam, one in cassava. As far back as 1971, Nigeria, the groundnut pyramids, groundnut market in Kano was the size of the FCT. We let all of that go bad because oil came. So we moved from oil boom to oil doom. That having been said, it don't happen, like my people will say on the streets. Now, what do we do next? We can't keep bemoaning our fate. We as a people, civil society organizations, should get involved. I think it was the Secretary of Government of the Federation on one of the days that he was speaking at the Presidential Task Force briefings that happen on every weekday that said that even this issue of procurement processes that we say we should do opening of bids and so on, things may still have happened, and then you come and watch, you just be watching a movie. It comes down to attitudinal change, and painfully, our people are even expecting, for example, the Presidential Task Force, people are expecting a lot from them because those are the ones we are seeing. So we see someone like the Secretary of Government of the Federation who wakes up and gives out a circular and says, everybody fall in line, do the right thing. And then a lot of opprobrium is thrown at him. But that having been said, you must do it. If you want to be popular, then you go sell ice cream. So the fact remains that a few of us need to get up, be counted, wear your jersey and play your wing, but make sure we score the goal. What is the goal we need to score as a nation? We must develop our nation. I carry the green passport. I say that all the time. I don't want to be a second-class citizen elsewhere where my country may be called a shithole. Now, as much as possible, we need to understand this about systems. If we refuse to come together and build the systems, and if you work in INEC, if you work in any of those organizations, you owe us a responsibility to stand up to be counted. We have seen members of the EFCC reject a bribe by some nationals from some other countries. So the people need to have an attitudinal change, which I think the SGF also mentioned in one of the PTF trainings. Now, I belong to some civil society organizations myself, Stay Safe Niger, and a few other organizations that I have found, Society of Igbo Professionals. The people need to take ownership. It's our country. We cannot keep blaming people. My people say, if you are not careful, they'll carry you and pass your father's compound.
We
Stand
have to
up to be
winding
counted.
down
It's
now.
our country. We keep complaining. If you want to run to Canada, you can run. I don't want to run to anywhere. It's my country, and I stay here, and we solve this problem.
Okay, Obinna, we must start winding down now, and we've only got 3 minutes to do that. And in making your closing statements, please let me just read what Oluwaseun Raji says. Since 1999, our democracy has been more of red than green. Unemployment, underemployment, poverty on the rise. Democratic institutions have been capped for the rich. When the people have been impoverished, voting business becomes the order of the day. Voting becomes a business. Your closing statements, please. Yes, sir. Tony.
Nigerians, step out. Step up. Get into the action mode and take charge of the electoral process so you can determine who leads you. You can determine which way you go. You can determine which way your children will go.
Assuming
as their
that
future.
your vote counts. That one.
So what you need to do is make your vote count.
How?
What you need to do is come out and vote. What you need to do is get involved in the election. Many of us don't even know our local government chairman. Many of us do not know how he emerged. You have to get out at the primary level. Go and join politics at the ward level. Be a voice to be reckoned with. That is the only way you're going to start and get this thing right.
Okay. Obinna.
It's not all doom. There's still light at the end of the tunnel. We would, like Mahatma Gandhi would say, be the change you want to see. Every person should get involved. A 21-year-old is already an adult. Let's stand up to be counted. Nigeria is our country. We will make it, like Pastor Ina Omako would say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We have been speaking the gains of democracy, and we had with us two legal practitioners, Dr. Akin Oshun and Anthony Ebe, who were in our studios in Lagos, as well as Obinna Uruakpa, who is a public and international affairs analyst, who joined us from our studio in Abuja. Yes. Thank you all very much for coming, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
And happy Inauguration Day to all of you. Sunrise will be right back with another interesting conversation in just a moment. Do stay with us.